First thing, here's the QR code for the 41 screenshot. Here we go. I thought I would do no intro at all, but I will make a little intro. Wolfgang say I'm independent. That gives me like a very privileged position when I come on the stage because I've got nothing to sell. I'm not a vendor and I don't work for one particular app, and that enables me to say stuff that others may know or may not know, but maybe cannot say. And today I wanted to talk about search ads, which is one of the things I do, but I have it as a little of a hobby. And my title is Hard Truth or Untold Truths about it. And there's a bunch of points that are negative. So I'm going to start asking, where are the Apple representatives in the room? Monica? Okay, here we go. It's just you? Okay, I can go all in then. And the reality is, I want to pinpoint at some stuff that is not often said, because you will read, everybody has their own interest, no? So you will read an agency post about, oh, how good is Apple Search Ads for us, and best channels in profitability, and so on. They're not going to say the other parts. If I pinpoint the hard parts, it's not because I don't believe in the channel or I don't like it, it's because others don't say it. At the end of the day, I'm spending a fair amount of time, and I've sent a few millions to Cupertino myself, so don't take it as a negative. All right, intro is done. Well, how does it work? Okay, search as basics. I guess nobody in the room is using search as basics, right? One? Okay, don't. I'll tell you later after. But the first thing is, I think you can't spend more than 5K on it or something, but the main thing will come in the last slide, so I'll be back to that. Oh, there's this beautiful 65% of downloads come after search, which Apple has the data, so I guess there is a way to read the data in a way that makes it true. I have this saying, which is, torture the data all you want, it will always confess to what you want it to say. I've never believed this was true, personally, because it's not true for the apps I work with, but maybe I'm not saying that the bigger apps have more search traffic, it's possible, but mostly because it hides. Well, there was some new stats that were shared last week. Actually, it was a bit weird because a year ago, Apple told us 70% of our App Store visitors do a search. I was like, okay. And last week, they published that actually only 43 of them do a search, which is technically possible because the first one is over the whole year and the other one is a weekly cohort, but it doesn't matter. The whole point here is that this number is only there to sell you Apple Search Ads. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because it's not true for your app. And it doesn't matter because it's all in the short tail. Like this 60%, this 65%, let's admit it's true for a second. 80 or 90% of it is coming from brand search. And not your brand, the big brand, Tinder and Duolingo and whatnot. So it's just a selling point. Do not think it's the starting point of, okay, so I need 2/3 of my installs to come from search and I need to put the major focus. I think it's a distraction. Like a lot of benchmark, but we'll get to that later. There is a short tail on the App Store, but nowhere like there is on web search. The App Store is fairly short tail. This is by nature. So if you notice that you're having 10,000 keywords in your account and there's actually 5 that are spending 80% of the money, this is normal. This is what we all have, or maybe 10, but you see the point. Extreme Pareto, more like a 98-2 than a 80-20. Pricing, pricing. I just put this because some people say, it is expensive sometimes on Apple Search Ads. So I wanted to showcase a little example that I had in one of my accounts where the CPM was in the 4,000 area. I guess that was a good one. And it's not on little spend, it's not on $10. Well, that was an interesting case. It may not be cheap, but that's the game. If you're not able to compete, then go to a battle you can fight. It's okay, like it's the reality. All right. UI, not the most exciting part of the talk, but I had some funny situation. Well, the first part is when it's loading. It's actually not doing that anymore. It's just like, but I had the screenshot, or the server contained an error, or this bizarre pink message that appear in the interface. But they don't matter. It happens on all the platforms. For me, one of the scary one actually happens quite often is when you load your campaign and there is no campaign. Like, usually refreshing works, but the first time I had it, a bit of a heart attack. Like I was on a really big account and I had a liability clause with a client who is in the room who told me, if you fuck up something, you owe us 100 grand. I was like, oops. Sorry, I clicked a bit early. One thing the interface, I think, doesn't do really good are the graphs, like to visualize what's going on. One in particular, they put the axis in a very bizarre way that we cannot configure ourselves. So in this case, the scale of the cost per tap is the same scale of the impression. Makes it kind of tricky to monitor how the CPT is going. One thing that I really wish is that dot graph, Monica, please apply them on the whole set, not just campaign by campaign. That would be really nice. So there's a bunch of things in the interface that are not the most pleasant when you're on it every day, but I guess you deal with it. One thing we wish is that there would be something after the install and not stop at the install, because what matters actually happened after. Integrating with MMP would be great, but Apple doesn't need to do that. They've got the purchase and retention straight from App Store Connect, and I never understood why this data is not there, given that Apple has it already. There's no integration to make, well, between their own teams, and I need it to assess the quality of my campaigns. I also think the assessment they can do on our campaigns would be better, so I wish one day those empty fields will be full. When I showed the slides to Geraldine, she was like, hey, your slide is empty there. I was like, yeah, that's the point, that's the point. There is a solution to the UI thing, and I think Apple created this opportunity for them. There are third parties that create an interface that are faster, that integrates with MMPs, and that have configurable graph, which is very helpful. Here are 4 of the ones I've used, and I think they're all very good tools. They have pros and cons, but they're all very good tools. If you have a small account and just one app, maybe you can deal with the interface because they also come with a cost. If you're managing very large accounts with like dozens and dozens of campaigns, and even more so with a multi-app account when you're managing a portfolio of 10, you probably want one of those. Unless you deal with it yourself with the API, which is also possible to build your own. And there are a number of tools that are not listing on the Apple partner page because they are built without a proper, like, I don't know, partnership thing or whatever. I have, for example, 2 developers who built a mobile app to check my campaigns on mobile, because whoever has ever tried to load the campaign manager on mobile, no. Well, AppTweak is building one, so we've got them in the room. It's in beta and it's free for now, so maybe that's one you want to try. I'm participating in this, and I like the direction they're taking. So let's see what they're cooking. All right, last thing about the interface. So let's say you still do not have enough money for the tools and you do not have enough skills for the API. There are a few enhancements you can do on the UI itself. One by split metrics surface the search popularity index within the list of keywords. I find this quite useful to know if I'm dealing with a very small keyword or big keyword. Quite useful to have this. Take it directionally, but especially since Apple switched the search popularity index that goes from 5 to 99, never understood that 5, but doesn't matter, into those little dots. But because the search popularity is exponential, you really want to know if the keyword is 38 or 47, because that does make a big difference. Anyway, let's move away. Oh no, last thing about the UI, the recommendation. We had 1 person on Apple Basic. Do I have more than 1 person using the recommendation in the room? No? Oh, 0. Okay, let's move on. There are some pretty cool recommendations sometimes, like this one that suggests me to raise my daily cap from $50 to 5 digits. Well, okay. Or that one that suggests me to raise my bid from 50 cents to 11 million. I think they fixed it and they put a cap on this so it doesn't happen anymore, but still it did happen. This is not photoshopped. Okay, let's move to keyword. Broad match. The thing you need to know about broad match is that it's really broad. Like really broad, like basically open. I had some bizarre cases. Well, some of them are in French here, but like I'm bidding on Shazam and I'm getting Télé Loisirs, okay? Or I'm bidding on iTunes and I'm getting Daju. I'm not too sure what's Daju, but I'm not too sure of the relevance of that either. Broad match can be interesting for exploration, for those discovery campaigns. One of the big issues with broad match is that when you add keywords, they come in default in broad. So if you make the mistake that you forget to put it in exact, it can go wild really, really fast. The solution here is simple, is always, always, always check your search terms, whatever you're doing. And I'm gonna go a step further with this. I'm gonna show you a little mistake that I did with the broad match just in a few slides. But before that, so search match, search match. If it's so broad, why limit it with a few keywords? Bring it on. I love search match for a reason, not for just discovery purpose, but because it informs me on how Apple algorithm is perceiving my app, what it relates it with, and it helps me understand what I'm doing wrong on my metadata, what I'm informing it wrong, and maybe iterate on that. For example, I have an app that has changed its USP over the time. Used to be English for kids, and now it's just training any soft skill, doesn't matter that it's language related. But years after we changed the metadata, we can see through this that Apple still perceives our app as a language learning app, which is not. So I'm trying to change the metadata, but it seems this algorithm is not forgetting after a few years. Doesn't matter. One thing that is tricky about search match is once you've been running it enough, all of the meat is hidden in those low volume terms. Just like here, I've got about 10% of the terms that were showcased, which is a bit contradictory with what I said, that the App Store is very short tail, and then suddenly, so the low volume terms is when you have less than 10 impressions, or 5, I don't remember, 5 or 10, well, doesn't matter, to protect privacy. So maybe there is a long tail after all, but it's a bit frustrating when you run into that one. Anyway, and the close variant. So let's say you're aware of all of this, not using broad match ever, not using search match outside of discovery, and you've put all your exact keyword and you're sure you're bidding on what you're bidding. My recommendation is still look at your search term on this. I've got this example where I was bidding on diet app, but what I'm actually getting served is on do-it-yourself apps. I don't know what's a do-it-yourself app, but probably some crafting stuff. And a digit app, which I don't know what's a digit app either, but probably not what I'm bidding on. Here you can, if you add the exact negative, it will start denying those. So, long story short, always look at your search term. There's some stuff hidden there. All right. Oh, and special characters. Yeah. So special characters, in theory, they're all interpreted as a space or a blank, whatever they are. All right. Like in ASO, it's the same interpretation. The thing is that it leads to some bizarre situation, like that one, that when I'm bidding on the generic term fitness, I'm actually getting served for Fitness Plus, which is a competitor from Apple with me. Okay, tricky situation, that one. But can I negate it? No, because the negative keywords are not factoring the plus either. So what's my solution there? I'll ask Monica. And delay. I mentioned that I made a mistake with some broad match keywords. So one day, I'm opening a new ad group, and I'm putting some very, very small keyword, like a very small volume of search. So I'm not too worried about it. I just let it run. But in a campaign that has a fairly high cap, and I don't know, after a few hours running, I was actually at friends having fun and dinner and beers and stuff, and I had a doubt in my head, and I checked the account, and I was at the middle of the story, and that particular ad group has already spent about $700 or something like this. I discovered horrified that I made the mistake of not putting them in exact, and it was serving me for stuff that I did not want, and certainly not at that price. So what I did do is I immediately stopped the ad group, but there is a delay of several hours before it's taken into account between the moment I stopped that campaign and the moment the money stopped getting out of the client's hands. About $800 were spent, which was a bit embarrassing to justify because it was my own mistake. I did ask for a refund, but I did not get it. Anyway, personalization. So you may know, and you probably know, that we've got a bunch of options to target, for example, gender. Very interesting for fitness to put a CPP, not discriminating, but like, let's say, I would put a specific CPP for women who want to train and men, because in fitness, they very often, the two genders want something different. I don't think there's a non-binary gender in there, so I'm going to stick to 2, or age, or new and returning users. The problem of this targeting is that it does not work if people have it off, and it's the case for 80% people. So if you're doing that, your CPP is only shown to 22%, and then you've targeted, let's say, half of them by gender, and then you've got people who do not update their device to iOS 15.2. They're only 10%. But all in all, you're basically targeting 5% of people, which that CPP is probably not going to go. I understand why they do it, like because privacy and stuff. But then do not use personalization too much because you're restricting the scale a lot. And you may not know why it's not serving. Returning users. We have a bit of a different definition of returning users with Apple. Here in the doc, I'm told that they may have had the app in the past, or may not, I don't know, okay. But have since deleted it, or they may have it downloaded on another one, or they may have it on another device, or not. So I'm not too sure which are those. Do they have my app or do they not have my app? Like, what I wish here is that we would split people who still have my app, like, which I call existing users, to people who've deleted it, uninstall it, which I call lapsed users, because I want to approach these people very differently. Especially if you're going to charge me for the click, but then they can't install because it's already installed, I want to know it. And that makes returning user campaign pretty tricky to manage. There is also another thing about returning user which is kind of tricky. In those groups, in those ad groups, I only want new users. Sometimes I have some personalization on for historical reason, but also because I wanted to be sure that I only get new users, because that client told me we do not want to show ads to returning users. It's another budget line and blah, 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 and blah, blah. And I still got served like a fair amount of downloads for these users. Not even counting the one who still have it, so they can't download it because they already have it. So that kind of leads to a very bizarre situation. For many years, I've always splitted new and returning users. I'm not doing it anymore since they changed since ad services, so about 2 years. I just put everybody and may they come, in all flavor at the same time. New placement. I'm probably going to get out of time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip so that I don't say too many bad things about the new placement. And I'm going to invite you to ask me at coffee after in private. Fantastic. Too long didn't read. Do not do it for pure performance. There are reasons to advertise on this placement. If you're getting zero scale, and it's because you're only looking at pure direct return, and this is not how this new placement works. They're very different from search results. Anyway, there are ways to spend a lot of money there. Ask Glovo or Google how much they're spending on this new placement. There's some serious money there. But if you're doing it for direct return, be careful about it. And be careful about how you measure it. It's not all you get with it is not all what you see. Oh yeah, there is this chat on the ASO community, on the ASO Slack about the new placement. No, and I'm going to stick just with the last one. Anyone have something positive to say about them? Anyone in the room wants to take the stage with me to say some good things about the new placement? Monica, you don't count. Okay, we move on. CPPs. I think Anton covered it partly, and we're going to talk again about CPPs later in the day, so I'm not going to be too long about them. I do think for very specific use cases, they are extremely powerful. I wanted to showcase an example that Mobile Action gave me about Opera, the browser, where they're showing very specific messaging when you're looking for the competitors, and that's something I thought was really cool. And there are many things you can do, like on brand search. I used to run them, but as a kind of A/B test proxy. I don't do that too much anymore because the variance is very different from the rest. Thing about CPP is a lot of people are looking at the results the wrong way. You're taking the results here and you're looking at it, and you see your CPP and the default, and you're like, wow, it's fantastic, the CPP is spending 10x more and the CPA is half. Like, I'm probably doing awesome here. Except no, those CPPs is just, it's been served to iOS 15 less than 15 users, then not just the same audience, and people who don't update their device tends to react differently. So you cannot compare the custom CPP with default. You can compare different custom CPPs between each other, except you can't have them running at the same time. So you're comparing in different period of time, which makes it a big bias. But that's the only way, is before and after. You should not compare those two. So I had a tweet because I've seen a big agency case showing, oh, look how we're good with CPPs. We raised the CTR by 40%, whatever. I'm like, no, you didn't. Like, anyway, impression share. I like that Apple has this share of voice report. So it gives me and I use it really a lot to inform, should I bid more, should I bid less, and so on. So they give it by these brackets, Are you in the 30 to 40% or 90 to 100%. And now they're even in the API, which we've been waiting for like a couple of years, so that's fantastic because I can have it in my database. The thing about it is they're not telling me who are the other competitor in there in the auction, which I can understand. And the third-party tool come in to show me who's there, which may help on paper, except one. When I've checked 3 of them, they were telling 3 different stories. Plus, they're telling me that I've got 10 or 20% share of voice when Apple is telling me I've got 80, so something was a bit fishy. I take them directionally. Be careful about the reliability of third party. Basically, I trust the number coming from Apple, and I'm directionally informing with third party. But in many cases, it's not really the reality. Be careful about them. I put advanced here because all the previous stuff was the basic stuff, and now we're getting to the meat. The truth is I put this just to do a check on time where I was, but I think I'm okay. 10 minutes, okay, 10 minutes for the juicy stuff. Search ads doesn't scale. A lot of people, yeah, I love search ads, great return, but there's no scale. By nature, it's search, I mean, let's forget for the new placement for a while. By nature, search cannot scale like display or paid social. It's the inherent nature. There's a moment you can't create more users searching for relevant terms, or you're starting attacking less relevant terms. But it's not entirely true. There are accounts that are spending millions a month. There are accounts that manage to properly scale. It doesn't mean you're able to scale, depending if your vertical doesn't have a lot of search, which happens. It's the way it is. You can't fight against the situation of your whole vertical. But it does scale in some instance. I have a bunch of accounts that are in the 7 digits. Those exist. It's not like a unicorn beast everyone is talking about. Like they do exist. What usually limiting you to get to that scale is your own return goals. Like the best way to scale is to raise your bids, right? So what's limiting you to raise your bids? You're not profitable enough. Your product is not making enough money. Go and whip a little bit the monetization team. You'll be able to bid higher and scale a little bit. Usually that's the limiting factor. This BNB thing is probably the slide that I think is the most important of the presentation, is that I always look at Apple Search Ads as being 2 different channels, not one. B stands for brand and NB stands for non-brand. Always split it. I've seen countless accounts where it's like, yeah, our target is 200% ROAS, and on Apple we're exactly there, that's fantastic. And then I'm making my split, I'm seeing brand at 500 and non-brand at 80, and you're like, are you happy with this 80? No. So always split. The brand is a very, very different mechanics. The brand defense, there are many reasons to bid on your brand, but you should never blend these 2 things together. That's an agency trick. Do not fall for it. Always split brand and non-brand. It's fundamental advice. Do not look at benchmark. This is just not about ASR. Like, it's not just about the App Store Connect benchmark. It's about all the benchmarks. Benchmarks are full of shit. It's very clickbaity. They're there for content. They're there to make you click. But they're not informing you of what you should do in most cases. One of the reasons is you never have enough segmentation. You never have, yeah, but in my vertical, in my country, I have apps at my size, how they're doing. You're comparing yourself with apps that are not having the same logics, that are maybe not having the same monetization scheme, whatever the word. And most of the time, I don't think I've ever seen one that was done properly, they do not split brand and non-brand. So what are you going to look? Like the CPT variation over time, blending brand and non-brand of one vertical in every country or one country in every vertical. That's very biased. I don't think those benchmarks are helping a lot. I know there are people who are making a lot of effort to dig into this data and actually publish, and I think Splitmetric has done a pretty good job in trying the best they could there, but be very careful taking it into account to make decisions. They most often have a bias because of this brand, non-brand, among others. Let's get to auction mechanics. So that's the meaty part of the line. So the first thing to know here is that this is not second bidder, like, what was the word? Like second bid auction logic. It's not that you're going to be charged 1 cent more than the previous bid. The auction mechanic may behave randomly at time, and you need to be on top of it. I wish it was a second bidding auction, but it's not. So you have cases like this where in blue is the number of impression I was getting served. I was like, oh yeah, I want more of that. I want more of that. So I raised my bid, and the green part is the amount I've spent, And you can clearly see that when I raise my bids, I've got the exact same number of impression there. It's just like, oh, you bid higher? Yeah, let's take it. Like pure margin. So be very careful about the fact that the auction is not going to necessarily react like you think it would. Another case I had, which is beautiful, and I had this on several accounts. I messed a bit with the color, but let's say this kind of, I don't know, green, yellow, bizarre salmon color is the ad spend, is the money I spend. And in blue is my impression. This case is on a brand campaign, so it's on my own brand. 90% share of voice, beautiful. And at some point I was like, I'm really paying this install expensive. And I tried slashing the bids by 90% down. And what happened? Exact same volume for 90% cheaper. So it doesn't help scale my spend, but I'm only interested in scaling the outcome. So if I can get it for 4 times cheaper, so be it. Probably Monica is not going to be happy with this advice, but try lowering your bids on keywords where, 1, you've got all the share of voice already, and 2, you've got a very good click-through rate. Because your ability to defend the position, even with a low bid, gets... Basically, what takes into account is not just how much you bid, it's how relevant you are, which is a bunch of factors, but the click-through rate, the TTR, is the biggest of them. If you've got a keyword with 20, 30, 40% click-through rate, you can lower the bid massively and still hold your position, which is not going to bring more scale, but it's going to save a lot of money. So it works for me. Try that one. Ad services. I guess I'm 5 minutes to the end. All right. So ad services, the way Apple attributes the install, which is completely independent of SKAd network and does not rely on ATT consent, which in a way is beautiful, although it's kind of disturbing from a logical point of view about privacy, but anyway, very useful for us marketers, so happy with that. It's the only channel that works on that particular attribution method. And it is what it is. I mean, it kind of does its job the way it's supposed to. The thing is, because it's not the same, you should never compare the result of Apple Search Ads with the results of other channels, because they're not measured the same way. You cannot measure scan campaigns with ad services. You cannot measure fingerprinted campaigns with scan. So it's kind of, Apple Search Ads lives in isolation in these results, unless you use a very, like, a media mix modeling system or something. And so take it, it works, but do not compare it to the rest, and especially do not compare it blending the brand. I'd say it again and again until everybody does it. It does its job though. It makes funny things too. There is this thing about, here I'm not talking about the market like share of voice of your impression, but the share of voice of Apple in the advertisement industry. And there was these numbers that came out last year originally from Branch, but that were published in the Financial Times, that since ATT, Apple has moved from 5% to 58% of market share of all installs. Like what? 58% of all installs come from search ads? No, I'm not buying this. Yeah, they were just looking at attributed installs. So obviously, if you move everything to scan, those installs are not attributed. And it looked like magically over half. The reality of market share here, you look at how much, there are reports on how much all of us spend combined, which is depend if you include Android and a bunch of things, but let's say it's about 100 to 150 billion a year. And Apple last year made around 8 billion on search ads. Maybe 9, maybe 10, they're not exactly saying because services category has a lot of things. That's twice as much as the year before, congrats, but that's still less than 10% of the whole market share. So Apple Search Ads is a super important channel, but the most likely thing if you operate at scale is that it's going to be somewhere between 5 and 20% of your marketing mix. That's normal. It's not that you're not good enough to scale, it's that everybody is in this situation. Unless you're really small or unless you're really, really good. Come talk to me. I'll work for you. Match rate is another of these terms I invent myself that I always check is I want to see beyond the install, so I'm looking at the MMP or you can also self-attribute with the attribution API yourself. The match rate for me is the ratio between the installs I'm seeing on my MMP and the installs that are reported in the interface. Like basically downloads and install, which is very confusing in terms of definition. I call them Apple install and MMP install. This ratio varies for a lot of reasons across apps. If you're bigger, if you're more restrictive with the MMP SDK loading and a bunch of things, there will always be a gap. If we're at 80, 90%, you're doing great. I still recommend you monitor it very closely because sometimes things happen. By the way, if anyone knows why on the new placement this match rate is completely different than on search rate, I'm I'm taking hypothesis, very interested about that, but keep an eye on this. Not all installs are the same. The one on your MMP and the ones from Apple are not the same, and the ones from Scan either. Countries, this is not very important, but because I've put it, I'm going to have to say something about it. When you pick a country in Apple Search Ads, Apple choose the country, the user is configuring, like is setting up their own app stores, which may not be the way you define a country, and which is certainly not the way the MMP define a country, which is geolocalized by IP. So you have this situation, and it mostly happened in the US store, because everybody wants to be on the US store. Nobody wants to be on the Belgium store, I'm sorry guys. It happens in the US, where you've got a lot of people from the Middle East in particular, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, from Nigeria also, a lot of them, where people store it, and I'm paying, oh, that was a signal, I have 1 minute left, I'm sure. And so you're actually paying the price of a US install, but it's very likely that you're not monetizing Saudi Arabia or Nigeria install the same. And it's kind of a tricky business in terms of reporting. I'm experimenting with a little solution for this week. Let's see how it goes. I will inform publicly in the Slack if it goes well or not, but it's kind of tricky. This difference can quickly be 30% of the installs are not coming from the US, so you might want to be careful and check how it's going. Anyway, and the last point, I really kept the meat for the end, is about cannibalization, which is a topic I love. I'm going to have to do it quick, but it's a good opener for the rest of the day to talk together. I like coming at conferences with funny t-shirts, so I had my wife do this drawing, but somebody told me they didn't understand what it was about, so I did not print it. I still thought a few of you might like it. Cannibalization is basically when you're paying for install you would have gotten other way. And I think in the case of search, not just search ads, any search channel, this is a real topic that is good to be aware of. How much is it happening? Not necessarily to stop advertising, but to at least be aware of how much it is. So one of the methods, and I know Simon has another, which I'm not completely aligned with, but there are several ways to do this. One of the methods that I do is just I post stuff once in a while and I look at the effect. If in this particular case, when I stop, I can, so search is in this salmon bizarre color. I can clearly see that the total of installs have gone down. There are installs that were truly incremental. And so I kind of try to measure a little bit what's the ratio, no? And in this case, we see a lot of incrementality. I'm willing to pay for this little cannibalization, but I want to know, is it 10%, is it 50%? Do not run this test the same way on brand and on non-brand, because it's obvious that the cannibalization is going to be much higher on brand. You're holding the first position, people know what they want, and they're clicking the first link all the time. Okay. And I'm done, so with time, but I still have one more thing. It's funny because I didn't really repeat this talk. I think it went okay, but at some point I was checking my slide and I arrived to that slide and I was like, oh, fuck, what did I want to say? And I had this little pressure, so yesterday night I thought I'm going to write on my hand what's in this one more thing, and I didn't. It washed out in the shower, so I've got nothing. But I do remember. There is value beyond just pure ROAS and direct return. No, I'm not trying to sell you the new placement. It's not just about what you're getting, it's about the value of insight. And I think here, given that Google does not disclose any keywords on UAC, given the value you can get for it, from it to inform ASO, for example, a large part of why I run search ads is not to scale it to millions. A large part of why I defend my brand is not only because I don't want competitors to steal 1% of those clicks, is because I want to be using this data to inform other stuff. There is a massive value beyond return, and I think most of us, we underuse the power of the data we're giving there. Some examples include which competitor are actually converting much higher. I had this case very often where I have one particular competitor that have insane monetization potential. Like, I don't know why, but it's how it is. Like, usually it's just one or two. It's not only to bid on them on search ads, it's also, it can inform me of a lot of other actions that I can do outside of the store itself on where's this audience? Why are they converting so much? And actually inform me of a lot of things that are completely unrelated to search ads. So do not just measure the value of this channel by how much money it's bringing you in, but also by how much you're using the money you're investing there. And I think I'm on time, fantastic. No, I don't believe it myself. Thank you very much. I'm open to questions all day.